the Popović family's temporary shelter just outside of Belgrade. It costs them $60 a month, which they can only afford because relatives in Germany regularly send the money. Since 1995, they and thousands of other Serbs have been in exile. In Milosevic's country, those expelled from Krajina are tolerated but are not exactly welcome. New political developments in Croatia encourage hopes for a return to the homeland soon. I was a farmer. I owned a house and some land. Now I'm practically on the street. I want to go back as soon as we can. I'd rather live in my own house, even if it's half destroyed, than in this dump.
Jer meni bi dovoljno bilo lakše živjeti u svojoj kući nego ovdje u ovoj rupi.
This was the scene in August 1995. A never-ending stream of refugees moves towards Serbia. Croatian troops have reconquered Krajina, and the war between Croats and Serbs has stopped for the time being. 200,000 Serbs have had to leave their Croatian homes, but there's little international protest. February 2000. In the office of this human rights organization in Belgrade, refugees wait for immigration papers to return to Croatia. This is the only place they can obtain a passport. They have no rights to Yugoslavian papers. The Popović family hopes to begin their journey back in a few weeks. I've put in my application. I will try to get a passport and other documents in Croatia. I want to do my military service there if possible, stay there for good. Back to the former war scene in Jagodnja, the Popović family's village in Croatia. This is our first impression. The village is deserted and most of the houses and property destroyed. We find signs of life in this hovel. The old woman is a Serb who returned a few months ago. She tells us that a total of around 30 people have moved back into the village, mostly elderly people. Popović. No, I don't know that name. Oh, hang on a minute. There is a Popović, but he lived at the other end of the village. A neighbour comes to see what is happening. Visitors are a rare sight in the village nowadays, especially a television team. She complains about how difficult life is. Many houses are without electricity, and they get very little help. But she is pleased to hear about the Popović family. Nebojsa, I know him. We're related. He's my aunt's son. We are not the only visitors today. A Serb from the village is living as a refugee near Zadar, and he plans to return in a few weeks. Today he is taking a look around Jagodnja. He takes us to the Popović home, which is at the end of the long village. The same scene greets us here. The large farm now lays in ruin. The house and stables are ramshackle, and the field is still full of landmines. We ask the Serb whether he thinks that the Popović family should really return. Of course, this is their property and they should all come back. Of course, if something bad happened here, it might be different. Politics have also played a part in it. Like many other villages in Krajina, Jagodnja has become a kind of ghost town. In the area where the Croatian-Serbian front line once was, just a few kilometres away from the Dalmatian coast, times seem to have stood still. For 5 years, nothing has happened here. The new Croatian government wants to fulfill all Western demands, that all exiled people should be allowed to return safely. 2 kilometres away from Jagodnja is Paloka, a purely Croatian village. In 1991, the Croats were driven out by the Serbs and were only able to return 5 years later. The war has certainly not been forgotten here. and rebuilding of homes and lives has only just begun. We ask the Croats in Paloka whether they can imagine the Popović family and other Serbs, not just the elderly ones, returning to Jagodnja. I would never allow them to come back. What have all these lives been lost for? No one talks about Croatian Vukovar anymore, where so many were killed. The issue clearly brings back lots of emotion and memories. Expulsions were violent on both sides. No way should they return. They've destroyed and burned down everything. They've murdered our young men, our children, brothers, sisters and parents. Back to Belgrade, Serb refugee Popović visits the film crew's office in the Yugoslavian capital. One of our team, Zoran Opera, shows him a video of the film we shot in Jagodnja and the neighbouring Croatian village. It's the first time in 5 years that Mr. Popović has seen any pictures of his hometown. He sees the destruction, his former neighbours, and listens to what both Serbs and Croats have to say about his family's return. It's not how I imagined it at all. The pain and misery that my Croatian neighbours had had to go through when I left is something I lived through with them. I didn't expect their reactions to be exactly positive, but I really hadn't expected them to be so resentful. And the village looks even more desolate than I imagined. Just as much damage was done to Serbs in the village of Jagodnja as was done to Croats in the village of Paloka. I still want to go home, but it will be impossible to return to this wasteland without any financial help.
Ali da se vrati na taj gareš bez ičega, bez neke pomoći, bez nekih donatora koji bi to bili, da bi dali pomoć, ja se ne mogući.
Fear and mistrust reign on both sides. The traces of the war in Krajina are still clearly visible. Serbs and Croats will evidently need a lot of persuasion before they can even think about making a new start. These are going to be tough years for the new Croatia.